Hello, we are From the Land for the Water, an Indigenous-centered advocacy group. And before we get into the presentation, I just wanted to start with a land acknowledgement. So we respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. For those of us who are settlers on this territory, we need to be accountable for the impacts of settler colonialism on Indigenous peoples and work towards decolonization. Like I said, we are From the Land for the Water, and we are an Indigenous-centered advocacy group aiming to bring urgency to the ongoing water crisis that First Nations communities are experiencing across Canada. Our mission is to raise awareness of systemic issues impacting Indigenous peoples, to take action and find a sustainable solution. We believe water is a basic human right, so we call on the government to take responsibility and accountability to ensure safe, accessible, and drinkable water for all. Today, we'll be covering an overview of what the water security issue is that First Nations are facing, and how each of the three pillars of sustainability, environmental, economic, and social, are impacted. We will discuss recommendations going forward and how this will look in the future. To get started, what is the water crisis? Many First Nations communities across Canada face boil water advisories that have persisted over years, even decades. These advisories are public warnings to boil tap water before using it for things such as cooking, drinking, or even brushing your teeth, as it may be contaminated. And as of March 11th of this year, there have been 35 long-term boil water advisories in 33 First Nations communities. 73% of the water systems that belong to Indigenous peoples are at a medium to high contamination risk. Solving the issue is essential for sustainable development as it directly impacts the three pillars of sustainability. And without solving boil water advisories and environmental racism faced primarily by Indigenous peoples, Canada will struggle to achieve long-term economic, social, and environmental well-being and success, and will struggle to meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The environmental impact is very complex. Deterioration and contamination of aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems is a significant issue that stems from the persistent lack of government actions in Indigenous communities. Environmental racism plays a role in this as well, which ties into that systemic injustice and discrimination faced by Indigenous peoples since Turtle Island was colonized. Shipping in plastic water bottles to reserves to have access to clean drinking water has had a devastating impact on plastic pollution and waste in the environment. Plastic pollution is detrimental to aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems as it breaks down into microplastics and contaminates the environment for hundreds of years to come, threatening biodiversity. One of the social impacts of this issue is the systemic racism and discrimination experienced by racialized and marginalized groups, specifically Indigenous peoples. Water is essential to Indigenous peoples' way of life, their identity, and their livelihood. And when their water systems are contaminated, there is a negative social impact on their individual and community well-being. The connection between environmental and social impacts is seen through the impacts that environmental injustices have on Indigenous people's mental health. Increased rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide ideation are prevalent in communities where there have been drastic changes in the environment, especially when it's contributing to their water insecurity. As the health of water decreases, Indigenous peoples feel their identity and livelihood is threatened, and it decreases their mental health and well-being. The economic impact of the issue is felt by Indigenous communities the most, as they need to ship in water to their communities for drinking, and they don't have the economic means to fix the issue themselves. Additionally, the water-related health issues result in a lack of economic growth in their communities, which continues the cycle. As they continue to get more sick, they can't grow their economy, and then they aren't able to fix that issue, and it just keeps going and going. There are two case studies that I thought would be interesting to compare. One is a predominantly non-Indigenous community in the city of Iqaluit, and in 2021, they had a fuel contamination of their water supply, and the Canadian government flew in an alternative water source within 48 hours so that they had access to brush their teeth, wash their hands, cook their food, drink, etc. And within 2 months, the entire issue was resolved and they had accessible, clean drinking tap water again. Whereas there are many Indigenous communities and First Nations reserves that still don't have access to clean drinking water. And the longest one in Canada is the Neskantaga First Nations in Ontario. And so they have gone 30 years. It's been since 1995 that they've had a long-term boil water advisory. And they continue to struggle to do everyday tasks that require water. And the government hasn't done their part to step in and fix the issue and set in an adequate water supply, as that is mostly put on the Indigenous community. And so going forward, if Canada wants to meet their Sustainable Development Goals set out by the United Nations, they're going to need to consult the First Nations and Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit people in order to implement their traditional ecological knowledge and their teachings about the earth into their policies, and have them consulted on any changes to water policies and also just how to resolve the issue within their communities, and just doing their part to help the environmental, social, and economic impacts. For the Sustainable Development Goals, Canada is not going to be able to meet all of our goals, such as number 6, which is clean water and sanitation, 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions, 11, which is sustainable cities and communities, and 10, which is reduced inequality. And if Canada is not able to lift all of these boil water advisories and implement stronger and more long-term policies that will protect the Indigenous peoples from this happening in the future and have quicker response times, we may be able to reach these goals, but without that, we aren't going to be able to succeed. And since you made it to the end of the video, I have a challenge for you. And so pick a day, and just throughout the day, I want you to keep track of every single time that you're using the tap. So whether that's to get some water to drink, make your coffee in the morning, to do the dishes, to shower or wash your hands, brushing your teeth, doing your laundry, any task that involves you turning on the sink and getting water, just keep track of it. And at the end of the day, you can reflect on how much you rely on that water source and how important it is for our well-being, to do everyday tasks, and just our basic needs. And you can understand the struggle and challenges that First Nations reserves face when they don't have access to clean water, drinkable water that's straight out of the tap. And I hope doing a challenge like this will give you an appreciation for the privilege that we have for having access to that clean drinking water when we can just turn on the tap and it's readily available right there, and you don't have to worry about any contaminants being in there. I really hope you do the challenge. Thank you for watching the video, and I hope you learned something. You can go to our Instagram. It's From the Land for the Water, and we post educational information throughout the days, and you can learn more information by following us there. Thank you so much.